I want to 3D print wedding dresses. I'm like dead set determined on it. I look at what are the pain points in the industry and how can I solve for those? The craft is a dying trade. Even people in China don't want to sew anymore. They're having a lot of trouble hiring young people to work at the factories, and they're turning into a service industry. And then I'm working with other factories, like working with Vietnam. The skill isn't quite there. I love to customize. How can we customize and make it more affordable? 3D printing. How do you avoid problems and issues? 3D printing. I just think it'd be so cool. So don't tell anybody.
The water's fine, homie, jump into the deep end. Sow it, you will reap it. We talking how to start it, how to grow it, how to keep it. Take a deep breath. You are now rocking with Founder Secrets.
Kelly.
Hello.
Thanks so much for coming.
Thank you for having me.
I thought that we'd start with, we don't usually start this way, but you have a very fun last name, and maybe the origins of where your family's from.
Yeah, so my last name is, I did not take my husband's last name. He wasn't too upset about that, though, because he valued my Italian last name, but it originates from San Marino, Italy. So when I was starting my brand and deciding what to call the brand, I was trying to come up with all these different names, and I'm like, it has the Italian vibe, and I think of Valentino and all of the other high-end fashion brands from Italy. Like, no one's going to say it. No one's ever going to be able to know how to pronounce it or write it. But I'm like, whatever. I'm just going with it.
San Marino is its own country.
It is its own country. It is.
I was just always was fascinated growing up looking at a map, being like, wow, who's from there?
Yeah.
You're the first person I met. How do you get like a passport or citizenship of San Marino?
I have no idea. I've never been.
You've never been?
No. I
Your
really
family's
need
from
to
there.
go. Yeah, I really do. All the Faetaninis in the world started there. If you look in other parts of Italy, there were no Faetaninis anywhere else. So,
Is anyone else in fashion?
no,
You're it.
I'm it.
So how did you were a designer before starting the brand? Did you know you always wanted to be an entrepreneur, or how did you end up starting the business?
Yeah, so I never thought I would be an entrepreneur, interestingly enough, but I've always been into art. So when I say it out loud, it sounds a little cheesy, but I'll just say it. Like, I was born to design dresses. So when I was little, my mom would always say I was coloring in the lines when I was like 3. Like, everyone would be like, oh my God, that's so good. So the natural talents that you're born with in a way. And then my mom was very crafty, and my grandmother was the seamstress on her street. So people would bring her pants and stuff like that. And I was 5, she started teaching me how to sew, and I'd rip apart pants and shirts and all of that. So I was like learning the anatomy of clothing at 5 years old. And then she'd pick me up every day at school, and I'd sit in her back room and sew fabric and doll clothes and pillows and stuff like that. Yeah, just really the craft kept going. Was in high school, was always sketching, creating my own clothes in high school. And I was a crazy person. I took history class in the summer, voluntarily, I know, to take more art classes during the year. So I took 23 art classes when I was in high school.
Wow.
I don't understand. Wait, so instead of taking history during normal school, you took more art classes, but then you had to actually take the history classes.
I did have to take the history, but not during the school year, because I would take it in the summer.
But it allowed you to take more art.
Exactly, yeah.
How many art I thought our high school only had
I thought it was just one art class.
I know. Now these days, I don't think schools offer as many classes, but they had like Fashion Illustration 1, there's pottery. I did every possible art class I could do. I was just like inundated in it. I loved it.
Do you think that one is born, because you're at 5, right? So do you think that one is born with this skill, it sounds like maybe you had, and then you got excited about it? Or is it, if anybody started at 5, they could have kind of evolved?
That's very interesting. I think it's probably a combination. Yeah, because, I always have the analogy of basketball players. You could play basketball for 20 years, but it doesn't matter. You could still really suck no matter how much you play. But then you see people who are like natural talents when they're like on the field or on the court when they're super young. So I think it's a combination of the natural talent being there and then really fostering that talent and practicing it. I think that if I didn't start so young, I probably wouldn't have been as good as I am, or I'd be a little bit more behind. But I think it's there. and it would have come out one way or another. And it's interesting because my daughter is 6, and I can already tell with her too. She is like spectacular with like her writing skills and coloring, and she's even starting to do like fashion illustrations now. And so it's like a combination of what I went through. I could tell she has the talent there. And then I'm practicing with her. It'll be interesting.
You taught her how to
see.
sew too?
Not quite yet, but that'll be the next one. She's at.
Can't you like get your fingers?
Yeah. There's like little kid machines. My mom brought mine home when I was a kid, and my daughter's, I want to try it. And I'm like, yeah, I don't know. But yeah, like the needle through the finger is like a classic.
Did that happen to you when you were?
Somehow it's never happened to me. I know. I'd watch Project Runway, and people would always have the needle go through their finger on the machine. I know.
Ouch. But there are a lot of people who are good at a skill, right? Good writer, or they're a good designer, but they can't make the leap into entrepreneurship, and especially into creating a successful business. I know a lot of designers from my last business who were very talented, but terrible at business and at selling and at learning how to build a brand. How did you, especially if you weren't even interested in entrepreneurship at a young age, how did you make that jump?
Yeah, I think part of it is definitely luck, but I'm also, my personality, I'm very relentless. When I get my mind focused on something, I will not stop until I achieve what I've set out to do. And it's hard. So I think a lot of people might run into roadblocks, just turn away and say, oh, there's an easier path. The path of least resistance is a much easier option than just keep fighting through it. I started my business, I was 27, and I worked at a big fashion brand called Priscilla Boston for 4 years. I was the youngest designer at Fashion Week. I was 23 when I got that collection. So I was like walking down the runway as a 23-year-old. And it doesn't even occur to me. It didn't occur to me then. It occurs to me now. I'm like, holy shit, I was really young doing that. When I started the business, I was like, I just want to design dresses. I just want to be creative. And I really got into it. The first 2 years, I was like, what did I do? This is so crazy. I don't think I'm cut out for this. It was intense and hard. And I'm an artist. I didn't have a business background. I went to fashion school. We don't even take math classes or like any of that stuff. Like maybe they have fashion now. I probably had business fashion, but didn't pay attention to it at all in school. But when I started, I love to learn. I feel like I could be a student for life. And I found every possible free course in New York City that I could do. I was actually like going up to Harlem. They had this, I can't even remember what it's called, but they have this free program where they help people start their businesses. And you can take all these free courses and they teach all this stuff. So I did that. I found like any free mentor I could find. I was listening to every possible book on starting a business, all of that kind of stuff. And I made a lot of mistakes at the beginning, so that was part of my education. But you're right, a lot of creatives, most creative people are working on one side of their brain and don't quite have the tenacity and the skill set to flip over to the other side and switch into the business mentality. And somehow I was able to manage both. So I definitely think that's a lot of luck. And I realized over the years, I enjoy that side just as much as I do the creative side. The only challenge is switching back and forth can be tough. Like to really sit down and sketch and get into a creative space, it's hard because I really have to pull myself completely out of the business and just like tune off and shut everything down. And it takes a couple days for it to start to come out. And then when I'm in that world, I'm like, oh yeah, then it just starts flowing. But then when I'm in the business side of things, I think creatively, I have a lot of great creative concepts for design. But I feel like the creativity also lends itself really well to other unique business opportunities and ideas that like change the way we run our business that other fashion brands don't necessarily. And I think that's a benefit of having a creative CEO/designer, because a lot of the companies, the CEO is like the outside person, not designing. And I'm sure there's pros to that as well. But me being so in it, I've come up with some really cool, fun, creative ideas on how to run the business differently that set us apart.
What's an example?
So this seems really obvious now because it's all over the place, but we were one of the first brands in fashion to use the QR code, especially in bridal. I say bridal is like a dinosaur. It evolves so slow and it's so old and ancient, where every other industry evolves so quickly. So bridal is like probably 5-10 years behind everything else. And our stores, we were trying to figure out how can we, and we do a lot of customizations, so how can we teach our stores how to sell these dresses faster and give them access to all the information they need. So a lot of brands have a plethora of information anywhere. So brides in the store trying on a dress wants to know, hey, can I get this in a different fabric? The rep has to call, or the consultant has to call the rep. Then the rep doesn't answer. Then there's nowhere else for them to find it. They end up losing the sale. So I was like, how do we get around that? I was like, let's put QR codes on every dress. So then the consultant doesn't even have to know the name of the gown. She can just scan on her phone. It pulls up, and it pulls up all these pages of all the information. So we've created this massive, deep database. We use a platform called Nuclino, and we have every customization, every single price. We use photos of past brides in that dress, past customizations and photos, how you can style it differently. If your bride likes this, try this. So there's like other selling tips in there. And when we launched it, everyone was like, holy crap, this is incredible. And everyone's, oh, I wish every brand did that. And it's not like this crazy idea. It just seems like so obvious, but it is, we've built it into our business model where it's part of our organization and how it lives and breathes. So it's easy for us, but like any of these big businesses trying to do that and capture the information, they just don't have the structure to send that information out. So that's one of the examples.
That's awesome. You mentioned there were some mistakes early on when you first started you made. What were, if you can share some of those?
So many.
The earliest you can remember.
The earliest I can remember, because I was on the floor crying in tears, I think it was around my second year. So when I launched, it takes about 6 months to create the product from start to finish. So I had private investors that invested in the brand. So that kind of got us started. And I had worked from the other company called Priscilla Boston. So I was using the factories that I had the connections to from the business that I was working in before. There were 6 of them in China. I had been over there multiple times. Probably at that point, I had been over there at least 10 times. So I had good relationships with them. Quality was great. And that company had gone out of business, so there was no conflict of interest with me using those factories. So spending all this money, doing all the advertising, just dumping everything in. And the other fun fact is after 6 months of developing, it finally goes, you finally get the orders, but then it takes 3 months to make all of those orders and then get them in store. So I'm burning cash for like 8 months before I even get the dresses in store to start selling. So the first shipment comes in and they're awful.
Oh, no.
Terrible. Probably spent $60,000 on all of this product. And this is like all FOB cost. So like every store, everything that I opened, I was like, I can't send this product to the stores. It doesn't fit well. The stitching's terrible. I'm like, how is this even possible that this happened with legit suppliers that I've worked with forever? I couldn't even fathom. So I had to make the decision of, do I cut and sew all of these all over again and just liquidate, what I have and then delay the shipment again? And so I was able to split the difference. Some of it we were able to fix in-house, which is crazy expensive because everything takes 10 times longer than you think. With sewing, it's even more because it's such an art and a craft. So to fix these things, you're taking it apart. It could take days, hours on end to fix this stuff. And so I'm like, oh my God, there goes like literally all my money gone. So the first 2 years were the hardest for sure. And luckily we survived and got through it. And then the third year we were profitable. So it was a tight ship though, really tight. But to your question with investors, that was another foreign area. I was like, I didn't even know, I'm like, investors, okay, how do I do this? I had a couple of really good friends in finance, and one of them had worked on a lot of business plans and things like that. So he really guided me along the way. And he's honestly, Kel, he's like, I believe in you so much. I would be happy to be one of your first investors. And I'm like, amazing, thank you. So once that started to snowball, I have some ideas of some other people that would be interested. I ended up I have my father-in-law, 2 other friends, and then they had some other friends who were private investors. I'd never even met these guys in person.
Still?
And still, actually.
Wow.
Still.
Look at that.
Yeah, isn't that crazy? Still, 10 years later. They're amazing. And they invested in me. And these are like a lot of finance guys. And yeah, they just believed in what I had to say and the vision and what I wanted to do with the business and grow it. And yeah, didn't grow quite as fast as I projected, but.
How much did you guys raise in that first?
We did 200,000, and then I haven't had to do a cap call since. So we've been able to operate.
What was the vision that you sold them? What in your head, what was it going to be?
10 years ago, in the industry, there was a missing price point. There was either really high-end dresses or really low-end dresses. So you'd have David's Bridal style, or you'd have Vera Wang. And there wasn't really anything in between. We were coming off of 2008, so that price point was really needed. So I launched with that price point. That was like one of the main key points. And then the idea was I can do quality. It doesn't have to be Vera Wang quality, but even if it's 50% of that brides can appreciate the fabrics and the materials and the fit and the design and have something a little bit more fashion forward and not spend $6,000. We could do it at $3,000. So that was one of the visions. The other vision was customizations. So at the time, designers have a lot of ego. They design what they want, and that's it. And if someone wants to change it, not your problem. Who cares? I wanted to come to the industry with a different approach, a customer-centric approach. And again, like this is all before the whole like customer-centric thing even aired. But I loved the story of Zappos. And I'm like, I want to be the Zappos of bridal. That just feels good. Feels like a great company to work for. It feels like a great company to inspire people and change the way things are done in the industry. And in bridal, you would think that everything is like rainbows and hearts, and it's not, especially in the relationship between wholesale and designer and wholesale, essentially. So designer had like an abusive relationship with the retail stores. And I'm like, this is so ass backwards. They're the customer. Why is it not a collaborative partnership? And so I was one of the first designers to like reframe that. So then the big guys caught on and now they're like following along. But the customization aspect was let's customize and make it affordable. So I had this like whole business model of how we customize the dresses and make it affordable, where girls don't have to spend $1,000 extra to customize their gown. And we've been really successful at that. 50% of our orders are customized.
So you were the first to customize.
I don't want to say I was the first to customize. Like people were doing it, some were doing it, but it was really expensive. And then also it wasn't sustainable and there were a lot of errors. So stores didn't have confidence in doing it because they would customize something and it would come in and would be wrong. It was like devastating for the bride.
How did you fix that?
So building the whole structure of the business being customer centric, it's okay. How do we make sure none of those issues happen? It's like building the confidence and the structure. And so we did out different customizations and what those look like. And then we started doing digital mock-ups. So, here's the bride's customization. Let's do a digital mock-up and confirm this is exactly what she wants. Because people say something, you're like, oh, I want it off the shoulder. What does that really mean?
Right.
Is it like here or here? So we started doing that. And then I had the design team part of the customer service team. So the designers were actually working on the order entry and making sure that all the orders were entered with like the finesse of, okay, this is going to go in properly. We'd work with the factory, me and the team, and cross-check all the orders as they were coming in. So we had a new factory we started working with, it was like the second year I was in business. And this is really rare too. A lot of the factories that are more established, they don't really change their business model or structure to your needs. And so I happened to find one that was young enough who wanted to grow with me. And I set the standards of how I wanted to run the business. So they built their business around what we needed. So I was like, I need photos of every dress you customize. That's like a lot to ask of a factory. And a lot of these factories would never do it in a million years. And so they did. So they send us pictures. We go back and forth, make sure it looks perfect. And done deal. Everything was good and everyone was happy. For years, we would have maybe like count on my hands the amount of issues we would have, but it was so minimal. And then that builds customer confidence, and they love it. Like, we have one store who just like customizes everything, and brides, it makes them feel so special and amazing and unique. And I think especially now too, with the new generation of clients and younger brides coming in, they're used to everything kind of conforming to their world, and they want to be expressive and unique. They don't want to just take something off the rack and have it be what it is. So we get brides who will shop and try on 100 dresses and won't find what they like, because they're like, I like the bodice of this, and I like the skirt of that, and I like the neckline of this. I can't find what I like. And we're like, guess what? We can make whatever you want. And they're like, what? And it's really like an incredible experience. And I think that's the other really cool thing now too, is since COVID, retail is shifting to be experiential. And so that kind of gives us the upper hand now too, because part of customizing your own gown is like part of the experience, and that like special, unique moment that you get to weigh in on the designs and have a designer work with you and customize it.
I have so many questions.
Me too.
Why don't you go?
Well, I just had a question around, you talked at the beginning around the relationship with the designers and the retailers are abusive. I think that was the word you said.
I probably shouldn't have said
No,
that.
that's okay. I'm just curious, in the industry as a whole, what has that relationship traditionally been like?
Yeah, so the relationship is, it is what it is. So let's say the bride orders the dress and there's some flaws on it. The designer would say, that's just how it is. Like, you have to accept the way it is. We're not going to take a return. We're not going to remake it for you. Nothing like that. Or a customization comes in wrong. Not our fault. You're going to have to reorder the whole dress. So things like that. Also just like terms with running the business. So these stores have to commit to a large amount of samples each season. And so they end up spending hundreds of thousands of dollars in inventory, which is hard for their bottom line. So I've put in things in place like, I'm not going to make you buy 8 pieces or a specific minimum. I want you to buy what's going to sell and work in your store. So, it's not useful, and yeah, it'd be nice if I take your money and you buy 3 dresses that aren't going to sell because you have to. So it was like things like that. So other designers would force stores to buy dresses that they knew wouldn't sell, because then they would pawn them. So there's like this exclusive territory with retail stores. It's usually somewhere between 70 to 100 miles for luxury stores, that you can't have more in that kind of area. Just so there's a level of exclusivity. So they would say, if you don't hit your minimums, you lose the territory. And things like that, where coming from a different approach of, let's figure out, like, how can I help you grow your business? I want to be here to support you. That's my mission. And yeah, it was just unheard of in the industry at the time. Everyone would say, oh my God, working with you guys is a breath of fresh air all the time, which was like the biggest compliment for me, because I was like, it's great.
So how much is a dress on average?
So a couple answers. The average bride spends $1,500 to $1,600 in the US, but that's like considering all of America. My gowns retail on average, like our best-selling price point is probably like $3,500, but we go up to $6,000. We even have a couple dresses that are like $12,000, but our average is $35,000.
Gotcha. And I noticed on your website you have multiple stores. Some are your own, like the one you opened in Soho.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
But then some didn't seem like they had your name. Are those some of these partners you're talking about that you work with locally?
Yes, exactly. Yep. So those are our B2B partners. So those are retail stores across the U.S. and internationally. And then they fly into New York during Bridal Fashion Week. We show the new collection. They look at the line, choose what styles they're going to carry.
So they choose what styles to carry. Then you ship them some base styles, and they display them.
Yep.
Somebody walks in and is, I like that, but I want to customize it. And then the person that works there takes a picture of the QR code and is able to like scroll through hundreds of other options, and they select them on the app. Is this right so far? Is this like what happened?
Yeah. And it's more like an information database, but what's interesting about what you're saying is we're actually like looking to take that a step further. We're looking at technology where the bride can actually scan her body into the phone, and then she can swipe like different bodices and different skirts and actually like on her phone.
Like a smart glass sort of thing,
It
mirror?
doesn't even have to be a smart glass. Like they take a picture, like body scans, and it's cool because the technology exists. So like Walmart's starting to use it. There's a couple other like big apparel brands. So we're trying to get our hands on it, but it's almost like paper doll, but like a 3-dimensional realistic version of paper doll where you like take a picture of yourself and you can see, oh, I don't like that strap. Let me change the strap. Ooh, what would I look like in an A-line? But if you're curvy down here, it'll actually show you what the skirt would look like on your curvy bottom or on your chest or your neckline. So it's really fun.
So you would do this in the store, or you're saying this would be more of a D2C type of play?
This would be a B2C.
So this would intermediate the stores in a way that people could go on your website and just do that.
Yeah. And we would probably use it both ways. I think about it in the way of when you're selling a car, do so much research online of the car. Like you know everything, what's under the hood, all the details, this, that. And then you show up to the dealership just for a test ride, but you already know you're going to buy it. That's where I want to get to that point where brides have already determined in their head, I'm going to buy this dress because they've had the experience online, and then just going to the store is like a piece of cake. So then we're not relying on consultants and staff turnover and uneducated, unknowledgeable staff, because that's the hardest part about B2B. We're only as strong as our partners are, and retail's tough. High turnover, difficult, and we're in a high-end product line that takes time to learn. So that affects sales. If we'll see a store drop in sales, and I'm like, I bet they lost a consultant. They
Really?
lost their best-selling consultant, stuff like that. So we can eliminate that by using technology like this.
Why does it take 6 months to make a dress?
That's product development. So that's me sketching and then creating. I should do more behind the scene videos actually of this. But so to give you like a glimpse, I will sketch 80 to 100 sketches. From there, I whittle it down. I work with my merchandising team. We do surveys, a lot of market research with our stores, and narrow down the sketches to about 26. We'll submit tech packs to the factory, and then they start to do the patterns and everything. And they do a first prototype, send it over here. We fit it on a model, and then we do like design changes. We're like, oh, I don't like this neckline. Let's change it here. Let's do that. Let's switch the fabric. So that takes a couple weeks. Send all the comments back. Then they make a second proto, and that's usually in the real fabric. Do the same thing. Another model fitting, change the neckline, switch this, change the fabric. Oh, I don't like that. All the adjustments and comments, go back, and then they make a third prototype. And then that's where we're like finalizing the fit, all the details. And then we have just now recently, like one of the reasons I started the retail store is I keep thinking like, how can I, again, so customer centric, right? My goal is how can I help my stores sell my dresses better and easier, make better product? How do I make better product? Let me use the retail store as a testing center to gain feedback from brides directly before I even launch the product to the customers. Designing 26 pieces, I'll put it in the store for a couple weeks, get feedback. Brides will tell me like what they like, what they don't like, what fits, what doesn't fit, and I'll just like absorb all the information.
How do you even record that? Like your
how do you get
reps
that?
just write this down?
Yeah. So I have like templates that I have the team fill out after every appointment, and they'll just fill out. And the nice thing about having the store in New York is I'll just swing by. Like I'll see a booked day. I'm like, okay, I'm going to spend the day at the store and just be there. And it's just great to hear the direct feedback. But also the most fulfilling thing is being with a bride, and this is what I love. I don't tell them who I am. I just like linger around. And then towards the end of the appointment, someone will be like, oh, Kelly, what do you think? And they're like, wait, are you the Kelly? And I'm like, yeah. And they're like, oh my God, I didn't know you were the Kelly. And I was like, it's just so cute and heartwarming. And they're just so excited. And yeah, the hugs and the crying at the end and being able to customize a dress for them is super cool. So anyways, yeah, test the dresses. And then we also build in more time now where we can send the gowns to like our top 2 retailers and they'll test them as well. So then we'll take 26 dresses and say, okay, these are the 16 that like everybody pulled off the rack, everybody loved with these adjustments, and then we'll drop 10 of them. So that's about 6 months.
Gotcha. So for the models that already exist in the store and somebody orders some customizations, it doesn't take 6 months.
No.
How long does that take?
That takes, like, our standard lead time is 16 weeks. And that's just because you have a high volume of orders coming in at certain times, so they have to work that through the supply chain, plus making sure fabrics are stocked and things of that nature. However, we were also one of the first brands to offer a 2-week rush, which was completely unheard of in the industry. And I had pushed my factory to do 4-week rushes, and I was like, all right, I want to blow people's minds. Can you do 2 weeks? Like, even if we cherry pick like 10 dresses that are simple, can we do these in 2 weeks? And that basically means the factory has to cut and sew a dress in 1 week. They ship it, we QC it, and get it out in 2 weeks. That is crazy fast turnaround. So not only did we figure that out, but then we also didn't charge a crazy amount of money for it. I was like, why not? Let's make this accessible. And I think that's going to be so beneficial, especially like Amazon world. Like, I feel like if something's not at my door in 24 hours, I'm so annoyed. And it's like the generation of brides coming in, I need it now. I want it now. So we do see a lot of brides shopping later now, closer towards their wedding date. And a lot of brands can't turn around dresses as quickly. So that's a huge competitive advantage for us.
Did COVID, I mean, you mentioned the younger generation, they've changed some of this. Did COVID change any of this, kind of the buying habits or the way that people thought about this process or any of that?
I feel yes and no. Definitely after everything opened back up, there was like such a high level of enthusiasm that I've never seen before. Like the last quarter after everything opened, it was like a feeding frenzy. Brides were just like, I don't care, I just want to get married. And so it was actually easier to close a sale because they were like, I don't need to shop at 10 stores. I just want to buy a dress and get married. And so that was so nice. We were relishing in that because we were like, oh, this is great. Like easy sale. Now it's been 1.5 years, 2 years. Brides are starting to go back to like their normal habits and it's like FOMO, basically. They worry. They're like, oh, I want to see what else is coming out next season, or I don't want to miss out on seeing what's there or there. And so that's where you get brides shopping for 50 gowns to 100 gowns before they're saying yes. But
that's insane. I have another question. Why are stores, all wedding-related stores, like invite only, appointment only, closed? Is there like any wedding store that actually is available for just walk-ins?
Yeah, I think there are a lot of stores that will take walk-ins, but I think you want to give the bride a one-on-one experience so that it's not overcrowded, and there's a certain amount of fitting rooms, and generally appointments are like 90 minutes. So it's a decent amount of time. Yeah. A lot of stores are booked. They're just booked to the rim on the weekends. So like for us, we're by appointment only, but if a bride walks in and we don't have any appointments booked, we'll absolutely take her. That's generally how most stores would be.
Interesting. Another question I had is your name is obviously the business name. And I was wondering, there's some advantages to that, but I wonder what are also some of the risks or worries about that. I personally would feel very nervous that if something happens to the business or the brand, it will personally reflect on you forever.
Or you sold it, right? Or something like that.
Yeah. I think about that all the time because I'm so emotionally affected by like literally everything that happens in my business to that point because it's my name. So when a customer is upset, like it's so hard for me to not take it, not personally, and I'm a very sensitive person, so I feel things in general deeply. So that does take it to another level because I'm like, I feel like it's my fault. Like I owe it to them to make sure that everything is perfect for them. And I'm a perfectionist. Double-ended sword there for sure. And yeah, I've thought about if I sell it, selling your own name, and there's there's been a lot of brands in the industry that have started and ended up selling. And there was just recently like a really big lawsuit of someone who like sold their name and then she wanted it back and that kind of blew up. So yeah, definitely a pro and a con for sure. I do think the pro though is that people feel like there's a person behind the brand. And that's the other thing. Like other companies, David's Bridal or Essence of Australia, they're random names that you're like, who is Essence of Australia? I don't know. Is it like a bunch of, reminds me of that song, the Victoria's Secret song of the guy, just a bunch of men in California or whatever. I feel like that's like how those bigger companies are. They're great companies, don't get me wrong, but having a brand with the name is, and it has a story and a heart and a soul that people can really relate to.
How do you, so you mentioned there's kind of seasons to this, right? So maybe in the spring there's new, how do you keep it fresh, especially since you've been such a creative person for so long? If you go away in these holes to become creative and create these 80 sketches, how do you do that so often and not get, not tired of it, but how do you keep the inspiration alive?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. Travel helps for sure, which is great because I can say, I need to go to Italy and the Amalfi Coast. And
Visit San Marino.
Yeah, exactly. Who would think? I'm going to have to put that one on my list for the next trip. So a lot of travel helps immensely. Just being in nature in the thick of COVID when no one was going anywhere. I sat outside in my backyard and just looked at the trees and the sky, and that kind of like unlocks pathways to creativity. And sometimes like things just pop in my head, or I'm like, oh, look at the vine on the tree. And on other areas of inspiration, I had one season that was inspired by Shakespeare, and I incorporated like black lace, and it was like a dark romance. And sometimes the inspiration is more of a feeling. The inspiration that I'm playing around with this season is I found this old antique book called Lavender and Lace. And I was like, ooh, I like the sound of that, like lavender and lace. And then I started reading what the book was about. And it's about these like three young women and their romance and like the drama. And I was like, oh, I like that. And so I started to think about the dresses and the styles and like how the designs can evoke those like different personalities and different types of romance. I do a lot of trend research on what's happening in Fashion Week around the world, so Milan and Paris. And then the tricky part is combining the fashion trends where it's not overly trendy. Like every bride wants to be classic on her wedding day, even if she says she doesn't want to be a classic bride. But at the same time, the market's so oversaturated that it has to be different enough that stores want to pick it up and put it in their store, but classic enough that the bride can understand it, grasp it, feel beautiful and timeless in it. So it can be tricky, for sure. Look at architecture is another one. Is another thing I really love, architecture. There was one season I went to Barcelona, so that was really inspirational, looking at the architecture around there and just different seams and lines and things like that. Do
you try to pull out specific, it sounds like that you pulled out the vein or is that the way it works? Like you're looking for, ooh, I really like that. Or is it more of this, I love the feeling that's here when I walk through this street or what have you?
Sometimes it's a combination. It can be a combination or it could just be one of those particular things. Where was I at? It was on the Upper West Side, and I was looking at the architecture of some of the buildings, and I saw, I think it's called a Tudor Rose or something, and I was like, oh, that's really pretty. What is that? And then I just went into a hole and started doing research on the different carvings on buildings and where that came from. And then that led me down another rabbit hole of the era. And I was like, oh, I love this era. How can I incorporate sometimes it's very literal, like specific details that I'll pull. And then sometimes it's just more like feeling evoked.
How many seasons are there?
We do 2 seasons a year. So we show in April and October.
And what happens to all the other dresses from the previous seasons? And do you still keep them around?
Yeah. So usually like the life cycle of a dress is about 2 years. If it's a bestseller, sometimes it can be 3 years. Sometimes if it's a dud, we'll phase it out after a year, something like that. But like when they order in April, their inventory and stock usually won't get into their store until August. So they're getting the dress, it's like a couple months later. And that's like another thing. I'm like, how do I fix this? How do I get ahead of it? How do I change it to beat the market? Because if I can get my dresses in the store before everyone else, like staff, they're like, the stores are so excited. They're like, oh, it's like Christmas. I got a new dress. And they try it on every single bride. Versus if my dresses ship in at the same week that everyone else's, then mine gets a little lost. So we try to push and get our stock in faster than everyone else.
When you say you sketch and design, do you do this like an actual paper, or is this like what do you use to design?
I used to do paper, old school, but I have a huge iPad and I have a little croquis, which is like the outline of the sketch, and it's so great. It's so fast. So I can sketch it, I can do different textures, different shading. I can duplicate it and then change the neckline, and it saves me so much time. I can, with the layers, like one time I'll put, oh, I love this silhouette, let me put lace on it. And then I can tap the button and the lace disappears, and I can see it both ways.
What's that? It's like an app? What's that called?
That is Adobe Fresh that I
Oh.
have.
And then you can send that to China,
Yep.
and they will be able to create a dress from the file.
Yep.
Wow.
And then we send other technical details, like we want the neckline, this height, and these specifications. We'll sometimes send them references of other images that they could pull from. They'll send us photos back, like, how does this look? I'm like, terrible. Start all over. That's usually what I say. It's a process.
One question, Taylor's trying, but I wanted to ask, would you ever sell the business?
I think about it all the time, and like it makes me nauseous thinking about selling it. Like I feel like it's like my identity, which is really hard. And also, if I were to sell it, I'm like, I don't know what else I would do. I don't know if I'm passionate about anything else. So I envision it being a legacy brand. My big BHAG is to be the next Vera Wang, as notable as Vera Wang. And that's my motivation and drive to build this empire of bridal. And it can expand into different product lines and different things. And then maybe I have my predecessor, Livia, who's working on her sketches, who might take over and be my mini designer from there. But I think I envision long term, if I'll have a bigger design team that is essentially like executing my vision, and I could work as little or as much as I want, but it's around the strategy and the growth and giving my creative ideas and direction, but not really having to do much of the work long term. So,
for those who don't know, BHAG is Big Hairy Audacious Goals. Not all those business books and EO meetings, but it's a lot of acronyms. I want to ask, how do you get your customers? I hear a lot of similar brands getting into Instagram ads, and is that a big piece of it besides word of mouth, or how would you say?
Our best marketing and paid ads are Google ads actually right now, but it's shifted. So it used to be Instagram was our biggest traffic driver. Then I would say probably a year and a half ago, it shifted to be more Google ads. And then Facebook is like totally tanked. Facebook ads don't do anything. That's actually more for the moms. So mother of the brides are like seeing an ad and they're like, oh, honey, look at this dress. I'm going to book you an appointment. But Pinterest is a big platform for us as well. So every bride has a Pinterest board and they'll send us their Pinterest boards. And so we do some Pinterest advertising. But back in the day, we used to do a lot of runway shows, like legit full-fledged runway shows. And the focus there was getting all of the PR and the press. And that worked for a while, but then once Instagram popped up and you could start to build your own audience and own press and stuff like that, it faded, and they lost so much power. So we stopped doing the runway shows, and we're actually starting to focus a little bit more on PR again now. So we had a big press release when we opened the store, and I think it adds a level of trust and authenticity of the brand and some of those other things. It's just such a long play that you can't measure.
Yeah.
And I hate things that I can't measure. Like, I want to see metrics. I want to see you run like a full spread in a magazine for 30K and you're like, I have no idea if this is working. Because we have brides that are going in the store and you'd have to ask the bride, like, did you see it in the magazine? Or like, where did you hear about it? And half the time they like don't remember. Exactly.
But the cost, is it true that the cost of those Google ads and Instagram ads is going up recently or no?
I don't know too much about it because I just let my team handle that. They're like, oh, our CPR is down or whatever, CPU, I don't know what it's even called. But I'm like, great, keep it going. Or they just tell me things are going up. If I see like this going up on the chart, I'm like, cool.
Doing great.
Keep going. If I see this, I'm like, what's happening? And I don't even know, like, really. They're like, they tell me, and I'm like, all right, then fix it. But I've heard, especially in Instagram, I mean, like, our impressions are up and our audience is up and all of that stuff, but, like, it's impossible to gain new followers. So I think it's just an oversaturated platform now.
Yeah.
There's too much noise. Yeah, so...
Do you have any questions? I have two more.
I have hours of questions. I just want to be respectful of your time. I love it.
That's okay. I'm here. I'd be happy.
I'd be very interested in how do you, because I assume some of the people on your team are creative, like how do you manage other creatives being a creative yourself and with the two-part mind that you spoke about at the beginning? Are you able to use that to your advantage so that you can manage both those types of people, or what's your management style?
Yeah, so my management style has evolved. I definitely read tons of management books and leadership books. My go-to personality is, because I'm a perfectionist, which is one of the characteristics that makes someone a great designer, is because you focus and you obsess over details. And that's what, allows you to make your product better. The downside of that is that I obsess and focus on the details of everything, and I want everything to be perfect. So it's been an evolution of me learning to step back and trusting people. But it's not even that I don't trust them. It's just like I have such a high level of standards that I want to be met. So I've learned, especially more in the last year or two, is turning it into a teachable moment and like turning it into collaboration and giving them the opportunity to, voice their ideas and voice their opinions and really have them come to the table with ideas and thoughts. And I'm there to help them on that journey. So on the design side specifically, and I actually really love teaching people, my interns especially are like, I've learned more in 3 months from you than I have in 3 years at school. And I'm like, yes, mission accomplished. I enjoy teaching them my knowledge and giving them context and reason behind what I'm teaching. So it's not, oh, don't do it that way. It's more of, do it this way, because what I learned is when I do it this way, it didn't work out so well. And when I do it this way. And so I'm like able to give them knowledge through my experience, and that's been really successful. And then with my upper level management team, the creative stuff, I've had people on the team that are more open-minded and some people that are less open-minded. The people that are less open-minded, those have been a little harder for me because, I can see opportunity in everything and so many ideas. And the people that are less open-minded, they're like, no, I just want things the way that they are and I don't want to change them. And so it's taken some time to crack them open a little bit, but I've been successful at it. And then they're like, ooh, I see the opportunity here. And the way that I did that was I figured out what's important to them and how these creative ideas or changes support what they do in their job and how it makes their job better or makes their job easier or it makes them feel more fulfilled in their role. So in sales, I'm like, wouldn't it be great if these dresses sold more and you'd make more commission and you didn't have this problem or that problem? How do we solve that creatively? And then they're like, oh, I guess it would help me.
We're not in fashion. And so one of the things I want to ask you is how do you decide what you wear every day?
Great question. Not gonna lie, I'm like a Lululemon girl now. It's like I have 8 pairs and I just rotate them. I can't remember, was the documentary whatever with Steve Jobs where he wore the same thing every day. And with 3 kids and the business and trying to manage the husband and I have to manage the husband and everything else that's going on, I look for areas and things that I can simplify in my life. So if I don't have to think about, there's a couple of things that I do. Eating, I have a routine where I pretty much eat the same thing every day or every other day I switch it. It's I don't have to think about it. I just don't want to expend brain power on it. Clothing, I just wear the same 4 sweatshirts at home. This is post-pandemic. And my Lulus, and it's comfy and it's cozy and I feel happy. But when I go out, I love to get dressed up. I love finding things that are trendy and just make me feel good. Sometimes I'll do a little fashion show at home and I'm to the husband and I'm like, hey, you like this one or this one? And then he has no opinion. They both look great. And I'm like, you're not helping me at all. So thank you.
I'm wondering, I remember you saying there was a gap after 2008 in the market where you seized the opportunity, whether it was price and quality. But what if you were to start today, or if you're a person that's like you then today, where's that opportunity now?
I would say the opportunity is leveraging technology. And it's one of the things that we were just talking about earlier, but I have this long-term vision. I want to 3D print wedding dresses. Huh. I'm dead set determined on it. I'm just waiting for the technology to get there. But I look at what are the pain points in the industry and how can I solve for those? And one of the biggest things, the craft is a dying trade. Even people in China don't want to sew anymore. They're having a lot of trouble hiring young people to work at the factories, and they're turning into a service industry. And then I'm working with other factories, working with Vietnam. The skill isn't quite there. I love to customize. How can we customize and make it more affordable? 3D printing. How do you avoid problems and issues? 3D printing. I just think it'd be so cool. So don't tell anybody.
I won't.
As I broadcast it on the podcast. Yeah. This is my secret that I want to do.
This is the big vision.
But yeah, I think technology is a huge opportunity. Just a better user experience, better shopping.
One last quick one for anyone who wants to, maybe doesn't think of themselves as a creative person. Is there one place you could point them to say, hey, here's a good kind of spot to go for inspiration. Here's a spot to go that maybe inspires you. Is there anything you recommend for that?
That's a good question. I would say, I think I would go back to travel. But another thing that really helps me, if I'm stuck in a rut and I need to design or sketch or be creative, is meditating. So a long meditation. And then I would say in terms of designing, I go to WWD a lot, which is the biggest or most high fashion apparel editor. Yeah, I don't know if I answered your question or the answer that you're hoping for, but
thank you so much for coming on the pod.
Yeah, absolutely. This was so fun. Thanks, guys.
So great. All right. Thank you.
Bye.
Cheers.
Thank you for rocking with the homies. Taylor, Trusty, and Flaviu. Seize the day, own it. Until next time, hold it down, hold it down.